On April 8th, 1969, baseball would forever be changed when the Montreal Expos played their very first game, giving Canada its first Major League team in baseball history, winning their first game against the Mets and starting a tradition that would last decades of capturing a nation's hearts and joys, only to be ripped out years later when they left the country, never to return again. Today we're going to dive into the highs and how the Montreal Expos got started as the first Canadian team in Major League Baseball history. Today on Daily Sports History.
If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine. And maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them. From disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Welcome to Daily Sports History. I'm Ethan Reese, your guide, as you daily learn more about sports history, increasing your sports knowledge, as we dive into the Montreal Expos. And today's trivia question to listen out for is, what player got the first hit in Expos history? Listen throughout the episode. If you miss it, I will give it to you at the very end. Now, Montreal was not new to baseball. They've had baseball teams dating back to the 1800s, and the Montreal Royals were actually a minor league professional team connected to Major League Baseball, starting in 1897, and they would later become the farm team for the Dodgers, helping produce great talent like Roy Campanella, Tommy La Russa, Don Drysdale, and most notably, Jackie Robinson. And they were the first team with a Major League affiliation to break the color barrier in baseball, with Jackie Robinson in 1945, helping lead Jackie to break the barrier in the majors as well. Fortunately, in 1960, the team folded due to issues with the stadium. But that didn't mean that Montreal wasn't in love with the game of baseball. So, in 1967, at the winners' meeting in Chicago for baseball, Gary Snyder presented a formal bid for Montreal to host a major league franchise. In Montreal was one of 6 cities vying for one of the 2 slots available in the National League. Montreal's proposal boasted the growth of sports enthusiasm and the success of the Expo in 1967, which was a World's Fair that symbolized the city's culture and economic viability. Despite the initial excitement of the franchise, it faced significant financial hurdles, as many of the original investors backed out as they realized the cost that actually was involved in starting a new franchise in baseball. And the National League actually threatened to revoke Montreal's franchise unless they could make the initial payment in 1968. That's when Charles Bonferman, heir to the Seagram Empire, which, if you don't know, they're one of the largest conglomerates in Canada and known for making alcoholic beverages. And he stepped in as the principal owner, as he was motivated by civic pride and the desire to lead a major project of his own, and provided the necessary funds and stability to keep the franchise alive. So he was able to make that payment, and Montreal, as the cost for a team would be $10 million, as they were awarded one of the National League franchises, along with San Diego. And Bofferman hired an experienced baseball executive in John McHale as the team's president and Jim Fanning as the general manager. And in June 1968, they participated in their very first amateur draft, where they were able to pick up some players like Manny Moto, Mudcat Grant, and Murray Willis. And in early 1969, they brought in Rusty Staub from the Houston Astros to be that first face of the franchise, Rusty Stubbs. And he was a 2-time All-Star with the Houston Astros, and he also became the first All-Star for the Montreal Expos. He would be a 3-time All-Star with Montreal Expos, have his number 10 jersey retired, and join the Montreal Expos Hall of Fame. So, as for the name, Montreal was still looking around. They wanted to go by the Royals, as it was that team that Montreal had for so many years. But the problem was, Kansas City was already the Royals. So they had to figure out a new team name. They had lots of different names up in the air, but they actually picked the name the Expos as that was the main reason they were able to get a team. They used that they hosted in 1967 as really the driving force for their pitch to become a team. And so they went by the Expos. And it worked as a name that could be pronounced both in English and French. As we have to remember, in Canada, especially in Montreal, there's a lot of French speaking. And they used clever designs in their logo as well, as they had that classic red, white, and blue M that's on their logo, standing for Montreal. But in that logo, there's a small E for Expos and a B for baseball. So with the logo, with the front office in place, and they have a team star and a team ready to go, Montreal was now had a team ready. The problem was they also needed a stadium. So originally, Montreal actually wanted to have a stadium and have a dome, but there was a lot of financial issues in doing that. And remember when we did our episode on the Astrodome as the first indoor stadium, there was a lot of issues and it took a lot of money to do. And this was back around that same time. So the technology was there to do it. It just was Montreal ready to foot the bill to build this, and they were not. See, they were also getting ready for the 1976 Olympics, and they had all their money tied into that. So when they announced they were going to join the Olympics, the Montreal Expos expected to take over one of the stadiums they were going to build for the Olympics. But that was 7 years away. They needed an option now. In comes Jarry Park, which was a pretty small park by today's standards. It only held 3,000 stands, and they needed a minimum of 28,000 in order to host MLB games. So they quickly had to adjust their stadium in order just to make it legal to play for a major league game. And the stadium itself was very quickly put together and not a great stadium overall by MLB standards. It really showed kind of how cheap the Expos were at the time and how quickly they had to just get something together right away as their plans for a dome fell apart and they needed something. So they renovated, adding stands into the outfield, adding larger bleachers, putting in a scoreboard behind the right field fence, and added capacity for 28,500 players. And it worked for a little bit, but this was an outdoor stadium in Canada. So during the winter, as September and October came along, it started to get really cold. But luckily, in 1977, they were able to move into Olympic Stadium after the Olympics full-time. They would have a dome stadium to play in for those cold months, and those which really kind of helped them along in their journey. So now they have the team together, they have the front office, they have a stadium. It's time to play their very first game, which actually was not in Canada. It was in New York, facing off against the New York Mets at Shea Stadium on April 8th, 1969. And this game was more than just a debut. It really symbolized the expansion of the U.S. across the borders. I know right now it may not seem like something that we were trying to do, but in sports, we are trying to open up the teams to be a more global game. And baseball was becoming a more global game. We've talked about players from Japan and the World Baseball Classic. Baseball really is a world game. And this really showed that Canada had success. And there were and still are a lot of players that do come from Canada to play in Major League Baseball. So for the ceremonial first pitch, the Montreal Mayor, Jean Debreau, threw out the first pitch. Even though the game was played in New York, it signified a great start for a new era in baseball. And, of course, it was the first game of the season, so all the opening day festivities were going on, fans were crazy, and the Mets were a newer team as well, and they had never won an opening game before. And in the first inning, the Expos come out swinging, leading to a 2-0 lead, where Bob Bailey gets the first hit and extra base, hitting a double and cementing himself in the lore of Expos history. But the Mets responded in the second inning, getting 3 runs, taking a brief lead. Then Don McGinn hit a 2-run home run off Tom Seaver, hitting the first home run in Expo history. And they would continue to build their lead throughout the game, scoring 11 runs, taking a 11-6 lead into the 8th inning. But the Mets would rally back, coming back in the 9th, bringing it to within 1 run off a Duffy Dyer 3-run home run. But unfortunately, it was too little, too late, and Carol Dembera came out of the bullpen and would strike out Rod Gasper with 3 pitches, giving him the save and giving Montreal their very first win in team history, and became huge headlines in all news outlets in Canada as they were the first Canadian team to win a game and play a game. It was huge in the significance of Montreal in Canada and the sport of baseball as it continued to expand. And just a few days later, on April 14th, they would play their first home game in Canada. Now, it was April in Canada, and weather always has its issues. And they were actually shoveling snow off the field in order to make it playable, and faced off against the St. Louis Cardinals, where they had an 8-7 victory, winning the first Major League home game in Canada history. Now, despite their great start of the season, fortunately, they had a lot of struggles that first season and would end up with a 52-110 record, tying the San Diego Padres, who also started that same year. But they would continue to get better and better, and they would have a lot of bright spots, as Bill Stoneman would throw a no-hitter that season, and Rusty Stu would finish the season with 29 home runs and 79 RBIs with a .302 batting average, and be nicknamed La Grande Orange while playing in Canada. Despite the struggles on the field, the Expos had success with fans, having over 1 million fans come to the home games, averaging nearly 15,000 per game, which was good enough for 7th in the major leagues, showing the passion that Montreal had for baseball. And this led to a lot of good years for baseball. And in 1977, they would be joined by the Toronto Blue Jays, having another team in Canada. And in 1981, they would win their first division title, winning the NL East, and they made their first playoffs. But the team struggled financially and had lots of stadium issues. They did move into that Olympic Stadium, but it needed lots of renovations, and they struggled to keep a competitive team on the field. And after the 1994 strike, the teams was struggling financially more than ever, and they started to look for options to sell the team and eventually move it. And they would move to Washington, D.C., becoming the Nationals, leaving Montreal, again, a void of baseball. Unfortunately, this is how it goes. They had 35 seasons of baseball in Montreal, having success, having multiple Hall of Fame players play for them, such as Randy Johnson, Pedro Martinez, Vladimir Guerrero. But there's always challenges being a new team and being in a country where most of your players are from the United States. It can always be hard to have success. We've seen this with other teams. The Toronto Blue Jays have had more success than the Expos, but have also struggled with maintaining players. And in other sports such as basketball, with the Toronto, who struggled with the Vancouver Grizzlies and has struggled at times to get players to play up for the Toronto Raptors. It can be a challenge with these expansions playing in other countries, but it doesn't mean we should stop trying. The game of baseball has grown even more, and there's talks about even expanding again into possible Canada, Mexico, or even other countries, as baseball across the world has gotten better. As we've seen more international players have success in Major League Baseball than ever before. Maybe this Expos experiment showed how successful it really could be. And we will always remember that classic M logo for the Expos. I want to thank you for listening to today's Daily Sports History. If you like this, please like and subscribe wherever you are. And if you want, leave us a review. Tell us your favorite baseball logo. And come back tomorrow for more Daily Sports History. And did you catch the answer to today's trivia question? What player got the first hit in Expos history? And that player was Bob Bailey, who hit a double in their very first game against the Mets.